Good morning on this wintry Monday morning, the 16th of January 2023, and welcome to another YouTube episode of my intuitive reactions. Now, let me start with some housekeeping issues. Some of you, quite a few actually, are aware that for a number of years, James Abbott and I were recording and producing a program called Middle East Analysis, fondly shortened to MEA, which basically looked at issues affecting the MENA region as well as the Gulf region. Swana and Gulf regions, if you prefer. Well, last weekend, we recorded the last episode of MEA because we both felt, and I felt quite strongly myself, that it was time for a fresh start, for something different, that we'd done enough and we were beginning to wade into that uncertain space of tautology. The same conflicts, the same analyses, different events, but the core issues and the root causes not changing. So James and I decided that it is enough, that after so many episodes of Middle East analysis, we ended it with one that I thought was brilliant because James thought of the title, Walls Are Meant for Climbing, and of course the reference to the Berlin Wall, but also the reference to the separation wall between Israel and the Palestinian occupied territories. So hopefully we will come back to you at some stage later with a fresh start and a new idea. But I wanted simply to thank all our listeners for their faithfulness, for their comments, and for their interest in some of the issues that I raised in these episodes, from Israel, Palestine, to Yemen, to Libya, to Tunisia, to Syria, to Iraq, to Jordan, all the regions, MENA countries, plus what also is happening in the GCC 6 countries, the Gulf Cooperation Council, including lately the World Cup that took place in Qatar. So thank you, and let me move on. Now, I'm Armenian, you know that. I've said that so many times already. So let me start today this episode with an Armenian issue that tackles the role of the church when it comes to various conflicts. And of course, when I talk about the Armenian conflict, I'm not going to refer back to the 1915 genocide. You've heard enough of that. I'm going to come to something closer to our contemporary days, and that is the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh, that little enclave in the southern Caucasus, where a blockade is strangulating the inhabitants of this space because Azerbaijan has decided to close off a corridor linking the enclave to Armenia. So no medical supplies, no food, no assistance is allowed from Armenia to the enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh, known to Armenians as Artsakh, because it's the only link, the only road that connects the two together. And the church has spoken about it. The Armenian church has been quite eloquent and quite voluble about this conflict. And recently, it called for a meeting of various church leaders from the Anglican Church and the representative of the Coptic Orthodox Church in the UK to come together in the House of Lords and meet with the Armenian bishop in order to discuss this blockade, this dangerous, almost existential fact on the ground that is taking place these days. And incidentally, the idea of having this meeting at the House of Lords is something that I suggested to our own Bishop Ab Initio when we were having a chat. But the meeting did not pan out the way I had hoped for it to be. I wasn't there. I excused myself and I did my own interview on one of the satellite channels about this conflict. But I heard from many people that there were words aplenty. There was a bit of social media coverage as well, and such as tweets, for instance, and the possibility of an item or two in the Church Times or in some other church press. But my question is, what then? What afterwards? What comes later? Words are fine. After all, they are my tools as a lawyer too. But the church has a humanitarian duty. After all, we have been talking for decades and decades about witness, about diaconia. So how is this being done in the context of this conflict? Is the meeting at the House of Lords or elsewhere only one for information sharing, for advocacy? Is it a quest for PR success for the participants themselves? What about the churches coming together through their various national and international instruments, the CTBI, the CTE, CROs, church-related organizations in this country, and ask for direct humanitarian relief? Why not go a step further? Why not be bolder and say, organize a plane load of humanitarian relief that goes from the UK to Armenia and then in lorries via this blockaded Lachin corridor toward the enclave? It is very likely that the Azerbaijani soldiers will stop the lorries and not allow them to go in. It's even possible that the Russian monitors, for all that they're doing, might also discourage, between inverted commas, the lorries from continuing toward Nagorno-Karabakh. Good. That is the core of what humanitarian relief is when you want to be visible. It is a PR tool that makes people wake up, scratch their heads, and think about what is happening. After all, what is in the lorry is not guns, it is medical supplies, medicines, and food. It's a way of making people wake up rather than just coming together, some 15, 20 people, and doing a boring representation or a talk about the history of the conflict, which could be found on any search engine that you and I have on our computers. Am I being cheeky? Am I being too forward? Am I being too ambitious? I don't think so. So let me leave Armenia to one side and go to a neighborhood that I consider my own and that I'm very fond of. Let me go to Israel, Palestine. Let me go to the Holy Land, the very hub of the Bible, which saw the light of day there. What do some churches do? They talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They talk a little bit timorously about a new extreme right-wing government in Israel that is already killing Palestinians in the north of the West Bank, in the south of the West Bank, demolishing houses, introducing new laws that ban flags, Palestinian flags, from being hoisted. Anything that is Palestinian or that reeks of Palestinian nationalism is being strangled, stifled. So what do the churches do? They talk about it sometimes, maybe in a sermon or a homily, or maybe in a piece that they write. Even some groups like the Holy Land Coordination, they go and visit the Holy Land, Israel and Palestine, in order to show solidarity. But what does solidarity mean? It means, according to what I've witnessed over the years, meetings, a press release that is quite cautious and at times insipid, and then what? Why not go to the Kremizan Valley, where the separation wall snakes through and cuts through the convent there, separating it from the school? Why not go and protest at a checkpoint where Palestinians are treated like chattel? Why not go to Hebron, where Masafer Yatta is witnessing the demolition and the depopulation of its Palestinian and Bedouin populations? Why not do this and then have the world press cover the news? Again, am I being too cheeky? Am I being too ambitious? Am I totally so spaced out in the way I see my faith working that what I'm saying is ridiculous? It will be met with an indulgent smile or a pat on the head or the shoulder saying, yes, Harry, you like acting or working outside the box. This is why you haven't been the institutional success that we have been, perhaps. Maybe. I don't disclaim that. But I'm also reminding you, dear viewers, that I'm not rewriting church teaching, nor am I introducing any new theosophical ideas into the ministry of the churches. I'm simply saying, with those two examples, Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenia, Israel, Palestine, I'm only saying that they should have, the churches, the church leaders, the church institutions should have the backbone to walk the walk, just as they often talk the talk. I always recall, amongst many other examples I could give you, but time would disallow it, I often recall in the Gospels of Mark and Matthew, for instance, the story when Jesus went in and overturned the tables of the money changers. That wasn't just him issuing a press release or him meeting in the Senate and talking about the issue. He was acting. And it was so famous or infamous a moment that it ended up being recorded in the Christian Gospels. Prophetic. In my humble opinion, our religious leaders, or some of them, and their acolytes, the people that like to be in that circle, and trust you me, I've been in those circles. So I'm not basically imagining things. I've been there. I've been there at pretty much the higher end of this circle. So I know that some of our religious leaders and their acolytes are missing the opportunity to make a difference. Sitting in a cosseted room and patting each other on the back, or going to Palestine and also to Jordan and being feted, is not the basic ministry of a religion. In this case, Christianity, that, do I need to remind you, is defined by crucifixion that heralded a resurrection. Now, let me make it clear, because some people are getting uncomfortable. Some people are saying, uh-oh, Harry is now going to be ostracized by even more people within the Christian church. I hope not. I have a lot of love for the church, for the teachings of the church, and for some of the people who represent this church. I myself am a Christian, although I constantly struggle to practice my faith. So these aren't the words of someone who is anti-church, anti-establishment, an agnostic or an atheist, if you want. But having worked with the church in its universal sense for long years, I can add that the church, in my opinion, today is tired. And it has also become distracted, bloated, and has lost its prophetic edge, which has been replaced by other epithets. For instance, instead of prophetic, we say ecumenical. So talking about the ecumenical, let me say that this week, this very week, in January 2023, is the week where Christian churches meet together in different churches with different traditions in order to pray for a whole week for Christian unity, to come together and overcome the differences. Now, will it be the usual psalms, the usual words, the usual smiles, or will it dare to go a bit further in its advocacy and call a spade a spade? That is my question today. And that is the hub of what I'm trying to say. So before you throw stones, or before you switch off this episode because you think this is the rambling of somebody who's pretty much lost it, just think. What does it mean to be a man or woman of faith? And what does that faith entail? I'm not talking theology. I'm not talking about the sacraments and the basic ingredients of what makes us faithful in our respective religions and practices. I'm talking about how we act and the prophetic nature of our action. Armenia, where 120,000 population in the enclave, 30,000 of them roughly being children, are suffering. They don't have tablets for cancer. They don't also have painkillers. They don't have food. Doctors are unable to practice their profession. Or in Israel, Palestine, where one people thinks it is superior to another, that it can occupy it, that it can quash its nationalism, that it can cancel the cancel culture, it can cancel out the Palestinian conflict and say, this land is ours, because that's what Judea and Samaria were all about. Where do the churches fit into this formula? Talking the talk, or also walking the walk? You decide. And thank you.